Good morning. My name is Dr. Sharon Smith. I am a proud member of the class of 2014, and welcome to Reunion. It is an honor and a privilege for me to introduce our Dean, Glenn Hubbard, this morning, the Russell L. Carson Professor for Finance and Economics. Now, Dean Hubbard has shared with us that he will be stepping down at the end of June, essentially closing out 15 of the most celebrated years in the history of the business school.
Thank you.
And Dean Hubbard has succeeded in repeatedly seizing opportunities to modernize and transform the business school. His ability to assess both the growing and unmet needs of the financial world and of our community have led to a focus on entrepreneurship, to interdisciplinary programs that have led to initiatives such as the Tamer Center for Social Enterprise, the Richard Paul Richmond Center for Business, Law, and Policy, and of course the Columbia Startup Lab, which I know a lot of my classmates were able to take advantage of, and that was, it's been a really big boon for the school. But the most powerful and probably the biggest symbol of Dean Hubbard's impact on the school and the community will be seen when we open up the Henry R. Kravis and Ronald O. Perlman Center for Business Innovation, which will be the school's brand new home in the center of Manhattanville. So we're very excited about that. But beyond the meaningful programs and the initiatives and the brick and mortar, we really want to celebrate Dean Hubbard for really the pride that he's instilled in us for the business school and the belief that the school's impact on society will be in educating our future leaders, like many of us and the leaders coming up. And for ensuring in us that our community is vibrant, it is engaged, and it is energized by the shared future that we will continue to support together. So for all of this and for much, much more, please join me in thanking Dean Hubbard for his leadership and his dedication to the school and for rising all of us up through coming through Columbia Business School. And please help me give him a warm welcome.
Thank you. That was good. Thank you. Thank you so much for those very kind words. And I hope everybody's enjoying Reunion so far, yes? Yep. Good. That's good to hear. I always say to people when I greet them at Reunion, welcome home. And I mean that because it is your home. This is a place that I believe played a big role in your life, wanted to continue to do so. And I can tell you, and you'll see in my remarks this morning, what a role you play in our life for students who are here today, for faculty who are here today. So welcome home. Now, I'm a numbers guy, so I'm just going to start with some numbers, and then I'm going to use those numbers to do our conversation together. 2100, 33, 41, hope you're memorizing, a billion, 736, 2, 1, and 1. Now we'll test my memory and yours. So 2100 is the number of people coming to Reunion this weekend, across the weekend. So if you leave without a new friend or a new connection, it's your fault, because you've got 2100 people to choose from. Those 2100 people come from 33 states. And well represented here is not just the tri-state area, but a very, very large contingent from the other coast out in California and everywhere in between. We have 41 countries represented. I'm never 100% sure whether California counts as a country or a state. I know the president referred to Puerto Rico as a country the other day. So I mean, I think these margins can be fluid. In addition, on the state level, we also have, of course, DC and Puerto Rico counted in there, even though they're not states. So, $1 billion. Over the course of the campaign for Columbia, $1 billion has been raised. It didn't come from the sky, it came from you. $1 billion sounds like a big number but it has nothing to do with money. It has everything to do with purpose. What $1 billion means is the vastly different financial aid situation somebody faces today as they faced just a few years ago. What $1 billion means is the fact that we've doubled the number of faculty professorships so that the men and women who are here working with our students are truly the best in the planet. And yes, it means the Manhattanville Campus Project and all the centers and programs. Getting a community to lift that much weight for a school is about love for purpose. So I'm incredibly grateful to you for that. 736, that's the GMAT score of the class we admitted last fall for the average. It's at the very top of our MBA peers. They're also the most diverse class I've ever seen, and certainly among the most interesting. Not to say that all Columbia Business School students aren't interesting at any time. So how'd we do it? Now, partly it's a great admissions team. I always remind people that we admit a class, not individual students, meaning we think ahead of what's the diversity of thought, of background, of ideas, of profiles that make up a class. But partly it is about a very large emphasis on program and on financial aid to get those students. 2 is the number of big new buildings popping up out of the ground in Manhattanville. If you're not from New York and you don't come here very often, go a few blocks north to the new campus. You'll see some buildings that are complete. You'll see massive amounts of steel coming out of the ground, thankfully pre-tariff steel, for the two new buildings. And Henry Kravis did not believe me that his building was coming up. So on a day of sleet and snow, I went up to the Turner site, I put on a hard hat, and I told the guys on the site to take me up. And they said, "You're insane." But I went up to the top of a piece of steel, stood there, and took my selfie for Henry. So it is coming up. You can go see it yourself. 1 and 1, though, are very important to me. 1 is one very grateful deed. I realize I've had the privilege to serve for 15 years. The most direct thank you obviously goes to my boss, Lee Bollinger, the president of the university, and the trustees. I serve at their pleasure. But what I'm really grateful for, I'm grateful to Lee, in case you run into him, but what I'm really grateful for is your friendship and support. When I look in this room, I see friends, I see people I've seen all over the world, I've seen some of you I've taught in class over many years, and I'm very grateful. But the final one is the most important of all, and it's One Columbia Business School. We succeed because we are a team. We succeed because whatever your interest was in school, whether it was finance or operations or marketing, whether you've gone on to social enterprise or private enterprise or finance or government, we come together as a team for Columbia. That is super, super important. So what I wanted to do with you this morning and this afternoon is just talk a little bit about the journey of the school. The fact that I'm at a punctuation point gives me the ability to look back with you a little, and more importantly, look forward with you a little. And I'll do so from my head, because I am an economist after all, but also from my heart. Yes, economists do have one, in case you were wondering. So here's what we're going to do. First, because not all of you are connected with us all the time, we'll do a quick at-a-glance of Columbia Business School. Who are we? And importantly, what makes us distinctive? I don't know about you, but when I listen to business leaders and they talk about their firm as excellent, my eyes glaze over. I have no idea what that means. So what we have to do is say why we're distinctive for something that matters, and that's what I'll try to do. Then I'll spend some time with you on challenges and opportunities. Like any firm, we face challenges. Like any firm, we have opportunities. The trick is to not let the challenges get in our way too much and to seize the opportunity. We have done that as a school with your help with a particular strategy, and that's what I want to talk about. And then finally, to spend some time looking ahead, not only on the future of the school, but hopefully on your journey with us, how you can engage with each other and with us. I have to tell you, going all over the world, speaking to alumni, whenever I ask people about experiences, what'd you get out of the school, invariably, it's 1,000 stories, but it's a variation on one. that Columbia Business School is like a key that opened a lock. That lock could have been a great job, a personal relationship, a membership in a network, a deal that got done, or a sale that got made. We're super proud about that. So at a glance, who are we at Columbia Business School? So the real question is, why is CBS one of the best? If you look at applications to business school, we're always among the very top. If you look at value added in business school, we're clearly among the very top. Why is that? And that's not a statement of recent years. That's a statement no matter when you went to Columbia Business School. So the question is, who are we? What's in that DNA that makes that work? And what is it that makes us distinctive and not just a, quote, good business school? Who are we? We are leaders in the market for business education. I go to meetings of business school deans all the time. I went to one at Wharton last week. I can assure you we don't fix prices and things like that. That's illegal. We talk about challenges. We talk about opportunities. I'm probably unique among our peers that I'm super bullish on the market for global business education. When I look at developments in this country and in the world and on people's need to have business education, I see only blue skies. Having said that, that doesn't mean there's blue skies for the way we've always done it. And so what Columbia Business School needs to be, if you're going to be at the top of the business education pile, you have to be very nimble among several things. One is a traditional full-time 2-year quit your job, come here MBA. Another is executive MBA. Keep your job, be in that format. We're very big in both of those areas. We have a big full-time program, not the largest, but certainly on the large size. But we're definitely dominant in executive MBA. My colleagues and I believe that's a great way to get a business degree. We also have a significant presence in MS programs. So unlike an MBA, MS programs are expert degrees. So people would come typically almost right after college in financial economics and marketing, accounting and valuation, business analytics, and study with us, either alone or in partnership with the engineering school. We obviously have a PhD program to develop a pipeline of future scholars in business and a very large footprint in executive education, which is mid-career education. Some of that is what may be familiar to you, physical, face-to-face, small room situations. Others are vastly successful online programs. Each of these is our play in business education. And part of my task as dean has been to set in motion a portfolio that a future dean can dial up and dial down. The buildings coming up in Manhattanville are built to accommodate growth if we want to, but no plans to do so. So everything is about flexibility in a portfolio, and I'm pleased to say we're a leader in each of these areas. But what makes us distinctive? Now, you got to do two things here. You got to come up with something that's important and then say why you're better at it than everybody else. So what would be clearly important in business education is to bring together the formal nature of it, the academic nature of it, the teaching of finance or economics or operations or what have you, with practical experience. Now, that's something that almost any dean from central casting would say or aspire to say. The difference is we can do it better than anyone else. When the trustees asked me to do the job, they said, "What is your idea?" I said, "Well, I think every knowledge business is about ideas, talent, and network. And those we do really well at. But we need a strategy that makes us stand out. And to me, the real world plus the university is that strategy." Now, why is it that we're able to pull that off better than anybody else? Well, step one is location. Columbia did not always embrace the city of New York, despite the fact it's in the title of the university. Have you ever looked at stationery? Columbia University in the city of New York. It's in the title. For us as a business school, it's an absolute no-brainer. I remember I had been on the faculty not too many years when one of my colleagues had suggested moving to the suburbs so we could have a bigger campus, to which I replied that was the pastoral myth that if you lived out in the suburbs, you might as well be in Nebraska or something like that. I grew up in a farm town, but I've become a New Yorker over time. New York adds a lot, and it's not just physically, it's metaphorically. All the global services businesses of the world have New York as its nexus. The reason we operate things like the best immersion classes on the planet, the most guest speakers and practitioner faculty is because of New York. That's about access. And it's access here, but it's also access globally. I'm very proud of our global alumni network, and the reason I and my colleagues spend so much time on the road with alumni is to connect them. Because if you're connected, you'll think about coming to speak in class, letting us write a case on a deal you've been working on, hiring our students. I mean, all of that is access. Alumni are critical in that. This is Shiza Razavi, one of our alumni, who has been an absolute critical bridge in building up the Tamer Center, the Social Enterprise Center. At the core of any knowledge institution is faculty. This happens to be my colleague, Damon Phillips. The faculty here have in their DNA the desire to take rigor in their scholarship and marry it with relevance. So the idea here is not to write casual pieces that you might read, but to write very deep pieces, but on problems you care about. And I think students, particularly students who take executive MBA format, really feel that what they hear in class almost immediately transforms work, and that's our goal. We also are very blessed to have a lot of practitioners in our network. This happens to be Bruce Usher, who does a lot of wonderful teaching in the school. Whenever I ask alums on the road about their best experiences at Columbia, a lot of those experiences are because you had a very talented practitioner working alone or in concert with a tenure-track faculty member. We do this set of things better than others, and that's a winnable proposition. It's also part of our purpose. No organization can have a soul unless it has a purpose. For us, it's turning on three things for our community. And by that, I mean students at the center, but I also mean faculty and I mean you. So the first is to think like an entrepreneur, the word innovate. Whenever I talk to people about business school, I say you should go to business school to think like an entrepreneur. It's not because you'll necessarily start a business, but because if you close your eyes and think of a business person you admire, chances are you admire him or her for A, seizing an opportunity, thinking of something before somebody else did, and marshaling the resources to pull that off. That's entrepreneurship. You can do that starting a business, you can do that in private equity, you can do that in running the division of a company. Think like an entrepreneur. The second is to connect the dots. As an economist who studied the financial crisis that we went through, I can tell you that while a lot of people think it's all about ethical failures, I don't quite agree. That doesn't mean there weren't ethical failures, but I think the larger failure was a failure to connect the dots. Patterns that were out there could have been connected. We did a lot of soul searching as a school and redid our curriculum. While some business schools were just sticking Lehman Brothers cases in the curriculum, we said, no, let's think about how you teach students to connect the dots. How do you bring courses together to do that? Connecting the dots is very important. People who are successful in business, again, if you close your eyes and think of somebody you admire, it's probably because they can sort out signal from noise. That's what a great business person is. And the final is to develop yourself as a leader. The purpose of coming to business school is to be a leader. Whether it's in finance or commerce or industry, government, social sector, that's of course up to you. But leadership is the sine qua non. And what we do and have done is rejigger our core curriculum to put leadership up front. It was very hard in the days for me to pound the table on leadership when the first class you saw was accounting. Now, I love accounting, so don't let that get back to my colleagues. But leadership is first and foremost. Now, the radical thought here, and I know I look more like President Eisenhower than a radical, but here's my radical thought for you. All three of those things, think like an entrepreneur, connect the dots, develop yourself as a leader, those are teachable skills. I am not one of those people that believes you were born a leader, or born an entrepreneur, or born able to connect the dots. It is certainly true that some people do it better than others, but it's a teachable skill. our course premised on that. I teach a class called Entrepreneurial Finance that's definitely premised on that. I put myself in the dock for that. That's why we are here. Who are our amazing students? I told you a test score, but test scores aren't what's interesting. It's the backgrounds. I could tell you hundreds of stories about our students. We have more than 700 full-time students, more than 400 EMBA students. You can see by the backgrounds of these three students, they're in the class that just entered, everything from incredible military backgrounds to entertainment backgrounds to industry backgrounds. Our admissions people literally scour the planet looking for these folks. We're not just waiting for somebody to think about us, we want to think about them before they even do that. The students are a lifeblood, and I can tell you as somebody who teaches every term in the MBA program, they are a true joy to work with most days. Now, careers. This is a professional school. So people, I hope, are coming here for the joy of economics and things like that. That's my hope. But they also come here to get a job. And so it's an important metric for us and one where we do very well. So these are data across classes that have recent completion. You can see that basically everybody gets an internship who wants an internship. Virtually everybody has a job within 3 months. If they don't, typically it's an entrepreneurial situation they're working on. And we have a 5-point satisfaction rating we do with a third party, and almost everybody has a 4 or a 5 in satisfaction. That probably looks familiar. Basically all top business schools are pretty good at this. But let me tell you, it's radically different and radically harder. And here's why. So think about lifting weights like this. This barbell is McKinsey, Goldman Sachs, things like that. That's half our students. Half. The whole other balance of the barbell are firms that hired 2 or fewer MBAs from us last year. Now, some of those are mature companies. They just don't hire a lot of MBAs. Others are startups. That's a radically different career management system. McKinsey, that hires about 65 people a year from us, amazing, thank God that they do, they have more of a white wine and shrimp toast system. So it's just a massive reception system that's easily staffed. When you're talking about the long tail, which is essentially the other half of our students, that's staffed partly internally at Columbia, but a lot with career coaches. And career coach is a fancy name for you. We tap a lot of alumni who help us in these areas, and we're incredibly grateful, as are those students. This has been a real change in business education. A lot of schools are struggling with this. Our tight alumni network, we think, has given us a big advantage. So I always remind students that Columbia will get you a job. Doesn't necessarily mean it's traditional McKinsey-like on-campus recruiting, but our network will come together for you. Faculty, were any of you in the, what I call the battle of the sexes this morning? I was there for part of it. Wei Zhang, a wonderful colleague. She's won every teaching award. She, like me, is a finance professor. I asked her to come down to the dean's office to be the vice dean for teaching and curriculum, even though cognizant that there was a huge opportunity cost of pulling Wei, because she's good at everything. She's better at everything than I am. Wei symbolizes the power of new professorships. Wei has one of those, and it has enabled us to attract and retain superstar faculty, many of whom, like Wei, simply do everything well. Wei's a great teacher. She's a great scholar. She's a great citizen. Did she thrash Bruce Kogut? I'm not going to ask you. So I'll just let that hang out there. Centers are an important way we bring people together. I told you I thought the DNA boiled down to ideas, talent, and network. So it's not surprising that when I sit down with center heads, I ask them to map into my framework. So to me, if you're running a center, you need to tell me what ideas you are developing for the curriculum of the school. The second, with talent, you have to tell me what you're doing for students. What is it that you're doing to help them either get a job, enhance their perspective? And third, on network, what are you doing to bring the talent in our alumni network close to that center? So I'll give you, okay, Graham and Dodd is the first one. So an example here, this has long been in our DNA, value investing. I think of it even deeper of the theme of value in the school, but the Graham and Dodd program has long pushed the envelope on new content. Tano Santos, right here, is our incoming head of the program. I think he's in one of the lunches today. He has taken over from Bruce Greenwald. And Tano has written a new book on modern value that I think will change the way people think about this. At the same time, we do a lot in the classroom for students, and our network here is incredible, starting from Warren Buffett. One nice thing about Warren is he allows me to say that an average Columbia Business School graduate is a multimillionaire. And I know that. I know that because Warren has $80 billion and I have 46,000 graduates. So thank you, Warren. Thank you, Value Investing. Another center that's huge for us is the Chazen Institute. Early on, when business schools were thinking about the world, Columbia had always been more global. Partly that's being in New York and Columbia University. Wherever I travel in the world, the university has, if anything, an even larger reputation outside America than it has inside America for a lot of reasons. Jerry Chazen's transformational gift to the school helped us really open up Columbia. So many of you may have been on Chazen study trips to places all over the world. We send faculty out for research partnerships, for case writing and teaching partnerships. We use Chazen to inhale and exhale, partly to inhale the world to Columbia Business School, whether it's lecture series that feature great global leaders, whether it's new teaching materials, but also to help us exhale. Take the talent we have here, whether it's faculty, alumni, students, and take them on the road. The Chazen Institute, super big deal for us. It brings together a practitioner network, great student presence, great ideas. Also in the Entrepreneurship Center, where I had involvement for many years and still teach, I believe we are really living it in bringing theory work in entrepreneurship together with practice. So I said, I myself put my hand up to teach entrepreneurship. I can't go out and talk about entrepreneurship unless I'm going to put myself in the well. So I teach a class called Entrepreneurial Finance, teach it every term in the MBA program, and the goal is to show you that there's pattern identification. I can teach you to think about how to find great entrepreneurial opportunities. We do this on the ground in the Startup Lab, which is in a WeWork facility downtown. We've long had the Greenhouse program here for mentoring students. We have partnerships with engineering and medicine, and a program where faculty here, including myself, will mentor young scientists and engineers. Many times a very technically able person will come to my office and describe a concept, and then say how they're going to be a billionaire. And I say, there's always a few steps between an idea and being a billionaire, because there's not that many billionaires. And a lot of it is our folks and our students working with people to figure out what's a business. So if you have an idea, what's a business? So for example, I have a colleague, Olivier Tubia, who teaches a class with engineering called From Research to Revenue. Well, we'll have engineering faculty say where the frontiers of different kinds of technology are, and Olivier and our colleagues and our students can then figure out, okay, where's the business opportunity there? Thank you, Jean Lang, and this program for many years for getting it off the ground. As you can see here, I won't read all of this, we have an enormous ecosystem of successful entrepreneurs. People who've built successful businesses, people who finance successful businesses, people who mentor successful businesses. And the nice thing about it is people come back to help. I don't get no's when I ask people to come back and mentor and help people starting out. Some of this is in tech, some of this is in consumer products, also in life sciences. Super, super exciting. I mentioned alumni in the network. There's an old saying, the sun never sets. People think that saying was about the British Empire. It was actually intended to be about Spain back in the day, but it is truly about Columbia. So anywhere you go in the world, I can't promise you Antarctica yet, but almost anywhere else, you're going to find a Columbia Business School club. We have 82 clubs, 46,500 alumni. About a third of those are hands I've personally shaken, so I know them from graduation. And one of the reasons I and colleagues go to so many club events is to really help build the brand of Columbia Business School. A lot of the brand is you. So when some young person thinks about coming to Columbia, chances are it has nothing to do with something I said on a website. It had something to do with what you said when they said, where should I go to business school? How should I think about my life? Alumni clubs are a way to bring people together. A shout out to San Francisco, London, and Hong Kong that were just with me on a recent trip. Thank you for your kind hospitality and for literally dozens over many, many years. I'm very, very grateful. Challenges and opportunities. Like any business, like any other knowledge firm, there's things going on in the environment. Some of those will create headwinds, but some of them create unbelievable tailwinds. I always say when I work with students, you play the hand you're dealt. And so the real question is not wishing you had different cards, because that's an abstract exercise, but figuring out what can go wrong, what can go right, and how do you tilt the odds to what can go right. So the same way I work with students is the way I try to work with my colleagues and team to think about these challenges and opportunities. What are the pressures? The traditional business schools had a really long run. I remember I started my career at Northwestern. I taught in the economics department. I taught in a program called Math Methods for the Social Sciences. I started teaching when I was 24 years old. So there's no way I could have practiced on MBAs. They'd have never let me come close to that. And I remember when I got a big raise my second year. So chest puffed up, I went to the department chair to say, thanks for noticing me. And he said, Hubbard, business schools are jacking up salaries and it's competition for us. That's why you got a raise. So whatever. He could have built my ego, but he chose not to. So anyway, fast forward many years, truly fat times in business schools because the global demand for the MBA was off the charts. Interesting industry fact, if you look at top business schools, they're essentially the same size as they were 30 or 40 years ago. Not many industries do you have the demand curve shift way out and have the incumbent firms stand in place. So it's an interesting point, but that's where we are. What are the threats? One is ROI. What's the value of the MBA? When somebody comes to me and asks about should I go to business school, should my son or daughter go to business school, I honestly say it depends. If you can go to one of the very best business schools, it is definitely worth your money. It's worth your money in a literal money's worth sense. More importantly, it's worth it in terms of the broadening. If you're not going to go to one of those schools, it's probably not worth it unless you have some social reason for doing that. The number of schools for whom it's, quote, not worth it is growing and growing and growing. Let's do a little McKinsey exercise together. Think about the industry. 3 buckets. Some schools, local and inexpensive, that's in equilibrium. A handful of schools, global, intellectually powerful, high price point, that's in equilibrium. Everything else, not in equilibrium because they're charging the price point up here but delivering the quality down here. So when you're reading the stories about what's going on in business education, don't confuse the average with the margin. The average business school is definitely in trouble. The top business schools are not. One threat is one-year MBAs. Many European schools, including NCI, a very good school, have pushed toward one-year MBAs. I don't think that's a very good substitute. I think you can teach somebody basic skills in a year. I also think you can teach them integration in a year. I don't think you can teach them both in a year. And what we have done is put me and others on the road to explain the value proposition of what we do and also offer hybrids. We have a January program. Did any of you go through the January program, which comes much closer to that? So that's definitely an issue. Technology and online. For many business schools not at the top, online is actually an existential threat. If it's ideas, talent, and network, chances are at many of those schools, the person in front of the room really isn't at the frontier of knowledge. Your fellow classmates may not be the same as they would be at a top institution, and the network isn't as important. So if the question becomes, how do I learn finance? Well, you can learn finance online. And you're seeing online displace a lot of second and third tier institutions as well as just the generational change in how people consume education. These are all threats. Physical space. These are pictures from the building of US Hall. I couldn't find it to show you, but I remember when I was raising money for the new buildings, I found a picture from 1964 or 5 of the architecture faculty protesting the building of US Hall. So it's not just my ex post judgment that the building needed work. Actual experts thought that. Physical space is a challenge, and it's not about quantity, although you can tell how crowded we are, and it's not about handsomeness, it's about purpose. So the way we teach is actually quite interactive. The way faculty want to work is very different than the way faculty offices are laid out. The new building is designed to relieve those constraints, and I'll come to that. Keeping students prepared for the world they actually live in is also important. Part of how we address both ROI issues and need-based diversity in the MBA program is with very large changes in financial aid. We're spending roughly 8 times what we did a decade ago in financial aid to do that. Facilities, the purpose of the new buildings is really to change the student experience. It's not just to make them more handsome. It's not hard to do relative to US Hall. It's about changing the way they process education. And most importantly of all, changing the curriculum. So depending on when you went to Columbia Business School, the required curriculum, the core, looks probably very different than you imagine. Every time I talk to faculty about the core, I say, to me, there are different theories of a core, but push back if you don't agree with me that a core should be something every business person must know. And if what you're teaching isn't something every business person must know, that sounds like an elective or a pathway. So we have tried to re-engineer into courses, pathways, and electives, and do a lot with team teaching and more involvement of practitioners, particularly in elective classes where they can add very special value. But I believe we have incredible opportunities. I think those challenges are true for any school. I think we can prevail, and here's why. You always have to ask yourself, for each stakeholder, why do they want to be with me? So let's look at students and faculty and alumni in the university. For students, so the question is, why should I get an MBA? A reporter asked me the other day, which business school are you most worried about? Expecting me to tick off a familiar name. And I said, the nuns. And he said, the Catholic Church? And I said, no, don't go to business school at all. My fear, and I can tell you it's the fear of all top business school deans, that if this room were full of bright 28-year-olds, that they all said, gee, I'd rather go somewhere else. So we have got to answer that question. So partly it's about higher earnings, to be sure, but mainly it's about exposure to ideas. What's going to change me? I really believe if you go to any top business school, I'm biased for this one, but any top business school, it has the potential of changing your life and introducing you to a network of men and women you never would have met any other way. Faculty. This is my colleague Modupe Akinola, who's one of our great leadership professors. Why would Modupe want to teach here? I have to answer that question to get somebody like Modupe to teach here. Well, partly it's support for her research. We've got to be able to do that. Partly she wants to be able to integrate across disciplines within the school and the university. And she wants some help in connecting to practitioners because she comes from academia and that's more of a challenge for her. When we answer those questions for faculty in a meaningful way, they want to be here. Alumni, why stay involved? Well, partly it's to facilitate recruiting. A lot of you and a lot of our alumni will come back to campus basically to hire people, for which I'm grateful. I have 1,100 to sell every single year, so I am grateful to you for that. But a lot of times alumni want to connect with us for 2 other things. One is to support ideas. What is it that's really out there that is burning question for you? And maybe we have a guy or gal here who's working on exactly that topic and we can make the match. And also for network. I know a lot of reasons people are active in alumni clubs, come to events. Maybe one reason you even came to this event is to build your network of friends and colleagues. The university. Why should Columbia University want Columbia Business School to be successful? One is a financial benefit. We do very well financially in the university. Research is incredibly important in the university. Our faculty are across boundaries. I'm an economist. I actually sit in the Department of Economics in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, but I'm also here. And I have colleagues in psychology and in sociology and in engineering who sit across these places. Cross-university collaborations are very important. Lee, my boss, whose picture is there, so tell him that if you see him, pictures in my slides. I have spoken with Lee about the fact that in areas like entrepreneurship, we should be a hub. There are many spokes. You can be an entrepreneur from medicine and engineering, journalism, the college, but we're the hub. That's what business schools do. The building project is super important for us. It turned out to consume more of me over many years than I would have hoped. I'm not a natural builder. In fact, I don't know anything about real estate. If you ask me, what do I know about real estate? It's pretty much location, location, location. And people I know who've made a lot of money in real estate tell me I've pretty much got it with that. But I'm blessed because not only did we have generous alumni to give the funds for this project, we have alumni like David Simon and Jerry Spire and others who do this for a living. And when I run into issues with an architect or with Turner, if you're not nice to Glenn, Glenn will bring his big brother Jerry in to talk to you. What was radically different here, these are two buildings because of the mass. So it's twice the number of square feet. If you were to add together Warren Hall and Uris Hall, multiply that times 2 across these two buildings for the same size community. So where is it all going? It goes a lot into redesigned classrooms that have much more breakout. It goes to faculty areas that have, of course, individual offices, but much more common space for people to come together, and much more informal, interactive space. If you were to just come together here and want to interact, I don't quite know where you would do it. I often find guest speakers even sitting out on steps. So we wanted to change that, and these buildings will definitely do that. As I mentioned, you can see them popping out of the ground right now, and I think it will be truly transformational. I have watched other schools and even firms have such a significant change in space and what it does to psychology. Liz Dillard, the architect, is a celebrity architect. She did the High Line, which many of you are familiar with, the Lincoln Center redesign, all that's Liz's work. Like all celebrity architects, she's also difficult. So I think Liz and I were an interesting couple because I think she looks at me as the classic finance guy. I look like a finance guy. I am a finance guy. I don't know anything about architecture other than to try to appreciate it. But I did remind her I do know a lot about budgets and numbers. So this building is a toing and froing of Liz, who would prefer to work for a Medici prince, where any amount of money is possible, versus me trying to get a great building. You'll see it. Proof will be in the pudding. It will be a great building. Financial muscle is critical for getting at opportunities. If you're thinking about supporting faculty or students, building buildings, starting new centers, they all have one thing in common. It's about money. So when I started, and the trustees asked me what I wanted to do, I outlined a strategy for them, but I also said the school's punching above its weight, which is nice, but you don't punch above your weight in equilibrium. You do that for a while, but eventually you'll punch your weight. So you really have to have financial muscle that's changed, and we've done that. So we have radically changed the fundraising program for Columbia Business School to really build that. And it's not just the very large amounts of money that alumni have been so generous to give us, and non-alumni. Ronald Perlman is not an alumnus, but a generous donor. But it's about the number of people giving. It's about the way in which people have connected with the school. It's about the number of people who've come to reunion over time. All of those are indicators of health, if you will, in our community and our population. I know all of us on staff are grateful. At the same time, we had to plow so much money into a building and financial aid, we did triple the endowment at the same time. We're punching better, but we're not punching the weight we need. I told the board, if you really want Columbia Business School to be at the very, very top in a sustainable position, we're probably in capital terms about $500 million short. Meaning, if we'd already had that great building and raised the same amount of money and put it in the endowment, we would be there. Is $500 million a big number or a small number? Well, relative to my net worth, it's a ginormous number. Relative to the capacity over time of people buying into a vision for the school, I don't think it is. Opportunities online are there for us. I mentioned a lot of people think of online as a threat. That's not how I see it. So when I have colleagues who say to me, oh my God, I can't deal with online, it's going to take my job. I go, wait a minute, have you ever used a textbook? You go, yeah, it's just the textbook, right? You are still important. If you're the person in front of the room, online's just the textbook. It's just a way to get people up to speed. So what have we done? We've done a lot of work in our core to do some pieces of the core online before people come. So we're not substituting for face-to-face, we're complementing. We've made an awful lot of money in executive programs doing that and using those same courses to repurpose for alumni and for certificates. So we believe this is an opportunity. The university is an opportunity. What's the first word in Columbia Business School? Columbia, right? So we should be plugging into university. This is a world-class university. Whenever I invite new students to think about where they are, I tell them, if you spend 2 years here and you don't leave Uris Hall, shame on you. First of all, you could do better in some of the other buildings. So why don't you go out? Why don't we think about entrepreneurship that crosses the university? We built the Chazen Center to work with SEPA, law, medicine, social enterprise. The Tamer Center has university-wide competitions. We're not just open to MBAs. And the Richmond Center is deliberately joint between the law school and the business school. We believe that Columbia is important to Columbia Business School. Looking ahead, I don't know how many of you are going to get to come to the annual dinner. I hope I'm going to see all of you there, first Monday in May. We have fantastic honorees this year. Fantastic. The best over my 15 years. I'm going out with a bang because I'm honoring myself. And I have, I guess you know you're old when you get a Lifetime Achievement Award. I told the board I knew I was old when some of the people on the board who were CEOs were actually my students. That's when I realized I'm getting up there. But we're also honoring Nina Tandon. We've tried to honor somebody who is on the come in business. Nina's life sciences business, Epibone, you'll hear about it at the dinner if you go, is wonderful. Our dinner chairs are two great board members, Rich Richmond and Tony Tamer. I really think you'll have a great evening if you come. I hope to see you there. Securing our future is going to be about locking down all those assets that I said. So it's continuing to grow financial aid. So when I talked about that huge run-up in financial aid, sounds great, but here's the rub. You don't compete with yourself over time in life. You compete with other people right now. So if you were to ask, what would it take vis-a-vis our near peers to be even in financial aid? It's about double. So when I said eightfold, that sounds great. But we got to double it again to get there, and we can. Centers and programs need the support to make sure that the best faculty want to be at Columbia Business School and to support directly faculty research through professorships. All of this generosity isn't about putting names on things. It's about changing the flow of ideas. Need your help. First and foremost, be engaged. You already are. You wouldn't be sitting here on a Saturday. Be part of this community. An alumni club, coming to an event here, going to an event anywhere in the world, recommending Columbia, anything you can do. Educate. When somebody comes to you and says, I want to go to business school, the right answer is not Wharton or Harvard. It's Columbia. Remember that. And you need to do it. And yes, give. When you write a check to something, you check on it. So being supportive to the annual fund, to the IMBA fund, it means a lot to all of us. What we can promise in return is a lot of reuniting. These are pictures from other reunions and events. I'm sure in real time the staff are taking your picture now to be posted somewhere. And this is important to us. When I see happy faces anywhere in the world or people coming together, I realize the network isn't just words on a page, it's people. Taking stock. This community has done an awful lot. That incoming class where I told you the GMAT, they were 41% women. Always told the staff, given business school demographics, mid-40s is a great place to be, 50 being an aspiration. We are well on that way. I think we do very well relative to our peers. The rest of these are numbers that I've mentioned before, but they are signs of an institution with great health. If you think about foundation and future, with your future not being disconnected from where you started as a foundation, the foundation is awfully good. So for me, now my wife is sitting right there, so Constance, who's been patient for 15 years, and my younger son, Will, is with her, and when I started, Will was about this high. Will is now as big as I am. They will tell you, I am not somebody who's going to run through anything. I wouldn't even run to catch a cab. I would just put my hand up. But running through the tape is what I have promised the community I'm going to do. I am full throttle until I am stepping out June 30th, or as soon as President Bollinger can get my successor here. It is very important to me to do that. The search committee for the new dean is working away. For me, the future is not 100% different than the past. I taught every term. I'm going to continue to teach. My office is going to be room 607 up there, so I'm throwing away a lot of books so I can fit back in. And I'm happy to help the new dean as much or as little as he or she would like. In terms of who's next, I can't tell you who the new dean is because I don't know. I'm not part of the process, but I can tell you that it's a great search committee. I can tell you they're interviewing wonderful people, and I can tell you this is a great job and a great institution. I don't know who he or she is, who will be here with you next year this time, but I can tell you he or she is going to be fantastic. Now, for me, when I was thinking about how to present to my colleagues and the board and students stepping down, I wanted something that brought everything together. I'm not somebody who likes to use tons of bullet points and PowerPoints. I'd rather use a simple image. And so I decided to use the image of Frank Sinatra's tombstone. Now, that sounds grim, doesn't it? But let me tell you, before I reveal to you Frank Sinatra's tombstone, when I made a presentation to a group of MBA students on this, there was a young man in the third row who raised his hand and said, "Who's Frank Sinatra?" And I thought, man, it is time to retire for me. So, Frank Sinatra's tombstone, the best is yet to come, one of Frank's hits. I absolutely believe it for this community. I absolutely believe it for you. If you hang with us, we can do this together. The best is truly, truly yet to come. And for that, I thank you, and I'm happy to take your questions. Thank you. 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 Good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now I'm going to text Robert Smith and say, I got a standing O, you didn't. Okay. So, what's on your mind? We've got a few minutes before I'm going to release you to whatever good food you've got for lunch. And a quick commercial, too. Joe Stiglitz and I are going to do a right versus left thing later in the day, if you're interested. Yes?
I'd love to hear from you, not as a dean, but as an economist. So let's address the elephant in the room. The Dow is at an all-time high. The S&P 500 is an all-time high.
Great.
However, the national debt is an all-time high. The trade deficit is close to the all-time high. The PE ratio on the S&P 500 is 21. So I'd love to hear from you to see if you think the market is overvalued. Why is it overvalued, and what could trigger the fall?
My wife, who's sitting here, would, I'm sure, tell you don't take investment advice from Glenn. Right? And many of you are investment professionals, but here's how I think about it. If you ask me if stock price is too high or too low, it would depend on what I think about the outlook for growth and what I think about interest rates, because they're discount factors. If an environment is good to okay, maybe even a little bit better growth prospects and relatively low interest rates, that can support fairly high cap rates and high asset values. If your view is that growth is going to stumble mightily, or that you think interest rates are going to rise a lot, that's very, very different. So for me, I think the market pretty much gets it right with the information that it has. I'd rather think about what are the worry factors. And to me, it's largely around growth. You know, in my profession, people are divided roughly in the middle of whether the best days for growth are in the past or the future. I think it's a bit of both. Growth has slowed relative to what people were used to, but there's no reason the US economy can't grow in the mid-twos. I make that as a statement about what I think will happen in productivity growth and about, you know, hours worked, which obviously is declining in growth rate. So I'm relatively optimistic about our future. What I'm not optimistic about is politics. And they're not unrelated. I wrote a book called Balance some years ago. It's out in paperback. If you want a great Christmas gift, you can go ahead and buy it. But the thesis of Balance is what gets great economies in trouble is not enemies, it's politics not keeping up with economics. And when politics can't keep up with economics, our growth machine is challenged. So when I say I believe in productivity, honestly, I think if you talk to any business person who's looking at technological change up close, they'll tell you we're way in the frontier of possibility. The question is, will our political system allow it to happen? So fears over when Robert was talking yesterday, for those of you who got to hear Robert Smith talking about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and things like that, I don't have any lack of optimism about where the frontier is going. I worry about how we're going to manage it. So long-winded answer, that's probably a familiar economist answer. Could be this, could be that, but that's what I think. Yeah.
So thanks for the education. I took the entrepreneurial finance. It was one of the better classes that I had at Columbia.
Let's make sure we get that on the tape for that.
So last century, right, if you take a look at it, perhaps you could make the point that communism as an economic model did not work for mankind, right? I mean, I think if you share the growth with a lot of people, you know, they screw it up. This century, right, capitalism might be at play. And the reason I say that is, you know, if you take a look at the top, section of the society, you know, they're starting to own greater and greater share of the wealth, right? And the pyramid, the sort of the broad pyramid is sort of lagging behind. And then if you take a look at some of the trends that millennials have, right, the work-life balance preferences they have, they're not that much excited about, you know, making, you know, money as the focus of what they want to do. As somebody who has taught a lot of capitalists, right, I wanted to get your perspective on where do you think the future of capitalism might be, not 10, 20 years from now, but say 50 years from now, and at a play for this century?
Well, it's a great and huge question. I have to tell you, I was in a debate a few years ago with the Dalai Lama on capitalism, and I told him before the debate, this is extremely unfair because your chair says His Holiness the Dalai Lama and mine says Glenn Hubbard. I don't think this is it's not quite fair. And he called me the high priest of capitalism, so I feel competent to have this discussion. Here's the way I think about it. I think in the way of the Scottish Enlightenment philosophers. To me, economic systems are in part moral arguments. When Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations, he also wrote very famously The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And Scottish Enlightenment philosophers were interested in what became market economy systems, capitalist systems, but they did it from a foundation of mass prosperity. My colleague and Nobel Prize winner in the economics department, Ned Phelps, has written magisterially on this topic for many years. To me, a successful economic system delivers mass prosperity. Communism failed that test. It has never and will never deliver mass prosperity. Capitalism can, but it's not foreordained. And so to me, the question for the next 50 years, and actually goes back to the answer of why I think politics is at root here, is how do you design a system that gets to mass prosperity? So 2 years in a row now, I have taken MBA students to Youngstown, Ohio. Now, a bunch of my board said, Youngstown, Ohio? Why would you take students to Youngstown, Ohio? And the answer is because I wanted them to see the contextual problems that are underlying our debate. So many of our students think white wine and shrimp toast with rich kids from other countries is diversity. That's not quite how I see it. And if you ask why the country's struggling, many elites, and it's not a partisan statement, it could be true of Democrats or Republicans, are completely removed from the lives of real people. I'm not making this as a social commentary, I'm making this as a very practical business commentary. You all are leading business organizations. I want my students to do that, and they need to understand. Capitalism will succeed if it goes back to delivering on mass prosperity. It has, and it's transformed the world. I have a very popular, I'm proud to say, freshman textbook, and I have a little feature in my book on why isn't the whole world rich? Sometimes Jeff Sachs and I do this debate for Columbia undergraduates. And to me, the reason the whole world isn't rich is some parts of the world have figured out institutions for mass prosperity and some haven't. It requires business people stepping up. You know, there were times in our country's history where business people made sure politics kept up with economics. You all and I need to do that. Yeah, Cheyenne. Yep. Yep.
Do you think that technology should feature more prominently?
Yes. Yes. Complete. Yeah, just to give you a sense. So Robert and I were both lapsed engineers. It's just that I became an economist and he became a billionaire. So we had different success profiles, but I was an electrical engineer and he was a chemical engineer. And more of our students today have a technical background than ever before. 250 of my MBA students took Python last year. There would have been a day in my years of teaching at school where that just wouldn't have happened. We offer a lot of joint classes with engineering students to mix the populations. And it's not even about technological sophistication. It's not that every student needs to be a coder, but you need to understand the mindset of those who do, and you need to be able to communicate, because frankly, it's this intersection of where the technology frontier is going and where business is going. So you're asking a question from a great financial services firm. And a firm like BlackRock has managed to ask, okay, if the technology is going here, where do we want to be in terms of the products we sell to investors, in terms of the technology solutions that we offer? Every firm has to think that way. So if you believe that, that means the core curriculum needs to have a lot more technology in it. Part of the letter in the drawer that I would leave to a new dean as he or she thinks about the very first curriculum reform he or she does, I would put that front and center. Robert has been very helpful actually in the dean search process, making those connections. Mary Boyce, who's a phenomenal dean of engineering, she came to Columbia from MIT, very interested in entrepreneurship. Mary is on that committee, particularly to have the voice of technology. So if the person isn't good at that, blame Mary. Anybody else? Yeah.
Well, I'm really pleased to see that 41% of the MBA class is female. It was 27% when I was here. And I've recognized over the last couple of years and talked to many of my classmates that many, if not most of the women in my class dropped out of the workforce and did not end up having careers in business. I'm an entrepreneur, a two-time entrepreneur, and I spoke on a panel yesterday and heard a startling statistic, which is that there are 12 million women-run businesses in this country, and over 90% of them have revenues under $100,000. How do we change that, and how does Columbia Business School play a role in that?
It's a huge question, and let me give you a two-part answer. One is with alumni leadership. So how many of you know Sally Krawcheck? Or know of her if you don't know her personally. So Sally has made it a mission to bring women into entrepreneurship and help get them financing, both based on issues in her own career. I heard Sally speak to a group of students a few weeks ago very passionately about this. And I think that that kind of leadership from women who are in finance, who are in business, and entrepreneurship matters a lot. At the school, we have tried to do it very carefully by supporting and funding women entrepreneurs. So about half of the spaces in our startup lab are women entrepreneurs, some of whom are business, some of whom are engineering, some of whom are medicine. Nina, whose picture I showed you, is somebody who had a PhD in biomedical engineering, but wanted to be an entrepreneur. And a group of us really helped her take her basic science to practice. So I think there's an awful lot we can do. A lot is also through executive education. Sometimes people leave a career, come back to a career. Exec ed is a kind of quick on-ramp back. What's different than when I left? So all of those things are answered, but it's not easy. It's not easy. Sir. Either one.
All right. So
You can share.
one of my classmates last night, I'm class of 2004.
Okay.
Class 2004, shout out.
Little cell there of, okay.
Yeah, told me that he is now teaching a class, this 1 week long intensive class, which is a new thing since I graduated. There might be some people in this room that would be interested in teaching a 1 week class, and I would like to hear more about it, and some other people might as well.
Yeah.
Could you tell us how that works, and what
I
kind of
teach it
people
myself.
are you looking for to teach that?
Okay, so let me tell you, these are called block weeks. Let me tell you how they came to be and the role they play now. So the original reason for a block week had to do with executive MBA students. So because our MBA students come from all over the world, they're flying in, you can't run programs globally the way we do and do it like every other Friday or going on Saturdays. You don't go to Hong Kong every Saturday. And so the question is, how do you, or I don't at least, so the question is, how do you get people together? We've come up with a block week. So in a block week, and I teach this myself in the MBA program, a block week would be you're with me from 8 to 6 every day for a week. So you have with breaks the same number of contact hours. I think they're amazing. So they started logistically. I think they're amazing. When I'm in a block week, I'm not driven by the tyranny of 90 minutes. I don't have to make my ideas fit into 90-minute blocks. If I want to take a little longer on a case, if I want to have a guest speaker here, something here, a break there, I can do it. Students love them. We use them in the MBA program because they're a way for students to take a class or two before the term and then have more time to look for a job. So that conflict between academics and work, we can break it up with block weeks. We are blessed to have a number of alumni who teach in those. If any of you are interested, find any of us on staff and talk to us about it. It is great. I will tell you, as somebody who teaches in that format, it's tiring, but I'm always glad when my 28-year-old charges are more tired than I am at the end of the week. That feels good. So if you're up for it, you should definitely think about it. It's an amazing, and by the way, you all have lifetime auditing privileges. Whenever I teach, there's always an alum somewhere in the room. And you ask yourself, how can he make that promise to 46,500 people? The answer is you won't take me up on it. And the reason is because you're busy and successful. But when you get to a punctuation mark and there's some topic that turns you on and it's in a block week, come join us. We literally one time had the chief information officer of Facebook, who was one of my students, come back to audit Rick Mishkin's monetary policy block week. So if you ever want to know what turns on CIOs in the Valley, apparently it's monetary policy. So, yes, ma'am. Yep.
Do you think creativity plays a role in productivity? And if so, how do you stimulate it both in the school and in the world?
The first part's a lot easier to answer than the latter. So the first part is absolutely. Changing the frontier is all about creativity. So when you look at people who have made game-changing innovations that affect productivity, they are people who think differently. Now, it turns out that that's more teachable than you might guess. So I have a colleague, Sheena Iyengar, who's on the program for Reunion, who teaches a Think Bigger class, in part with Craig Hatkoff, who may be known to many of you, on how do you think, whether it's the arts, business, innovation, how do you think differently? And the way I think about it as an economist is I think about pain points and problems you're trying to solve. So rather than thinking about how do I incrementally improve what I have now, what's a pain point? So I'll give you an example. Sometimes I will bring the Venmo entrepreneur and venture capitalist to my entrepreneurial finance class. And Venmo started because of a pain point of people running out of money, wanting to make payments, couldn't you use your phone? It's that kind of simple design, creative thinking that works. It is teachable, and we need to do a better job of it. So we have a couple of design thinking classes. We have an exec ed program in this area, and Mary, the engineering dean I mentioned, and I are keenly focused on this, because both of us believe this is a teachable skill. I can't tell you that I'm going to be the world's most creative person, but I want to empower our students to do that. Sir.
Dean Hubbard, thank you for your time you've given at Columbia.
Thank you.
What are you thinking about next in May politics when you're older?
Well, I'm just going upstairs, so that's the easy thing. And my wife is here, so I have to be super careful about what I say. So, no, so look, I'm not Donald Trump's cup of tea. It's very hard when you're neither a socialist nor a populist. You're somewhere in between, which is probably like everybody, or at least most people I know. So sure, at some point, I was very proud to be in the government. I enjoyed being in the Treasury Department. I enjoyed being in the White House, the OECD. It was all great, and I'd love to do it again. We need to get to a point in the country where we turn to people who have experience and safe pairs of hands to help. The public is not there yet on both sides, but the day will come. Pendulums swing back and forth, but the beauty of equilibrium, a concept I definitely believe in, it comes to rest. It always does. Yeah.
You said something very powerful earlier about politics keeping up with economics.
Yeah, economics is always, yeah.
And I think we live in a time of tremendous opportunity, but tremendous threats. So like drones, civilian drones shutting down airports, the possibility of driverless cars, leaving 3 million people without jobs who may not be able to learn to code, but at the same time we can share information and leverage technology and collaborate in a unique way. So if you could talk about specifically things leaders in this room can do, I'd be very grateful. And I know that's a difficult question.
Well, it's huge. I mean, sometimes when the president was talking about Mexican truck drivers, I think of no truck drivers. I mean, that's what I'd be worried about, not Mexican truck drivers. And to me, things you can do. So I and a colleague authored through the Aspen Institute a radical refinancing proposal for community colleges. Columbia is not the answer to these problems. We will take your money, for sure. But we're not the answer. Community colleges are the answer. And basically, a radical reform. Lincoln had the insight in the middle of the Civil War to have land-grant colleges. It was a radical idea to empower people to higher ed. The GI Bill was another radical idea. We need a massive block grant to community colleges. And if you're interested in the fine print, I could tell you about it. What business people can do is come together with community colleges. The celebrated example, probably familiar to many of you, is the work Toyota did in Kentucky. So when Toyota went into Kentucky, they figured out we got low costs, but then, where are we going to find the workers? Who's got the talent to work in the factories? And they realized that was their problem to solve. And Penny Pritzker gave a very large amount of money and her time and energy to work with Chicago community colleges. I've been working with her on this project to radically change how they prepare for businesses. I've watched the work that David and Charles Koch have done in Kansas of taking community colleges to guarantee a pathway to a job in Koch Industries. There are a lot of ways people in this room can step up. If we don't do that, again, I have no doubt science will be big. And I have no doubt my students will do fantastically well with it. But if you don't have mass prosperity and bring everybody with you, you're not going to survive. Now, I probably got to get you to lunch, right? Do I have time for one more question? One more question, so it better be good, and then I'm going to send you to lunch, Helen. It's yours.
Thank you, Dean Hubbard, and it was nice seeing you in Hong Kong. I want to congratulate you for such a successful weekend. Coming from Hong Kong, and you did mention about globalization, and I was thinking we only have probably a handful of people coming to the reunion, and it took me 5 years to come to another enriching experience. So moving ahead, is it any possibility of bringing this kind of event on a more regular basis so I can enrich myself, or we can share the experience, not on a Pan-Asian reunion every few years? Would that happen? Thank you.
It is definitely important for us. The school that I think does the best job of this is Wharton. I hate to say it. So when I talk about inhaling and exhaling, part of exhaling is many more global events. So the strategy for us, since these are also very costly, is how do you go on the back of admissions travel, faculty travel, alumni club events to make that possible. And I think that is very, very important. The next big global reunion is in Tokyo in 2021, but I'd love to see the school do a better job of even more of those events. And as I've told colleagues they don't have to be the dean. They can be a faculty member who's got a new book that he or she has written, or somebody that you all like in the community. It can even, for example, be a very successful local alum who can bring people together. So all good. Thank you. You're going to have your lunch now, and then we'll come back together. Thank you.